everyone, and welcome to The Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. The Wuhan virus has become a political football thanks to the Marxist Democrats. Understand, nothing they do is ever without a political calculus. They make everything political because politics is about power, and power is what they crave because all they believe in is this life. So when everyone was knocked off balance once the pandemic broke out because China lied, Trump was convening advisors and figuring out the best way to approach the disease, keeping a balance between physical health and economic health. Once Trump made his move, the leaders of the party of death sniffed out a political opportunity in the form of the economy starting to tank, and so they went for it. What is now turning out to have been a massive overreaction has in fact gotten the Dems some of what they were aiming for, a decline in approval ratings for Trump as the economy skids into the basement. 41 million Americans are now out of work, and the left, the Dems and the media and so forth, are cheering that because they can blame that and the 100,000 deaths from the virus on Trump, which they're doing nonstop. Once the 100,000 death count was surpassed, CNN and the rest of the fake news couldn't stop themselves from blaming Trump. A series of talking heads passed over the screen nonstop, pointing the finger and blaming everything they could think of on the president. Meanwhile, perhaps smelling blood in the water, Nancy used the opportunity to try and load up a $3 trillion spending bill with hundreds of billions of pet projects in there for the Marxist agenda. Polls continue to show high levels of anxiety about catching the virus and dying, and so some people were somewhat content with staying locked up in their homes as the economy tanked. On both fronts, health and economics, the Democrats were cruising while Trump was taking a bruising. But then a turn started. The goal of opening by Easter, hoped for publicly by Trump, was seen to be too optimistic, so that shifted to Memorial Day, and the beginnings of a sea change were noticeable. With temperatures heating up and people getting fed up, the calls for opening up the economy began increasing. But, and here is where Trump is about to flip the tables on the Dems looking to unseat the pro-life president, it is red states with Republican governors who are opening up, while blue states with Marxist Democrat governors still have strict rules in place. And the greatest fear the party of death could imagine is coming to fruition. The economies in those states are beginning to rebound with no corresponding outbreaks of the Wuhan. The Dems' media allies, in hopes of continuing to stoke fears and maintain a level of hysteria, have their reporters doing stand-ups on camera wearing face masks and warning of all sorts of danger and mayhem and death. But fewer and fewer people are buying it. The messages from the left, repeated breathlessly, have proved to be completely overblown and lacking any kind of clarity or even consistency. Dr. Anthony Fauci, back in early March, says nothing to worry about, then reverses course and says it's the worst thing ever. He says masks are pointless, then says they should be mandatory. Then he backpedals from that and says, well, it's just a courtesy to those around you. Next up, people need to wear masks and stay 6 feet apart, raising the question that if masks are effective, then why do you need to stand 6 feet apart? And conversely, if standing 6 feet apart is effective, then why do you need a mask? Then the health narrative shifted to it can be contracted from surfaces where it lives and thrives for billions of years. Then all of a sudden, well, we don't think so. So today's science, it might live on surfaces, maybe, sort of, kind of, we guess, we don't know. Then, after Fauci had proposed midway through the shutdown that we need to stay sheltered in place for 18 months, now he says, well, we have to weigh the economic costs as well. The models, remember those models to talk about nonstop back in March and April, the models, which were treated like divine oracles, which were used to make policy decisions, which have caused 40 million Americans to lose their jobs. Those models fell completely flat. Millions of Americans were going to die, they said. That's what they predicted, while barely a fraction of that actually happened. And of those who did sadly die, an enormous percentage were from 3 blue states, whose governors, most notably the revered Andrew Cuomo of New York, shoved sick COVID patients into nursing homes, infecting thousands and thousands of elderly, causing them to die. In every instant where the science was up for grabs, the Marxist media highlighted the worst, the scariest, the most hysteria-causing point they could emphasize. Cuomo needed billions of ventilators. People were dropping dead by the millions in Times Square. Every apocalyptic nightmare conceivable was predicted by Cuomo and the left in general, until the lying left's narrative began to crack, and Cuomo himself came out and said, maybe we overreacted. You think? Poverty costs lives too, but the Marxist left was and remains content to ignore that, except to keep saying how many millions are unemployed and it's all Trump's fault. So as people, even Biden, begin to creep out of their basements and realize, especially in red states, that this appears to have been more of an hysteria-driven pandemic than the nightmare scenario the left wants you to believe it is, still wants you to believe it is, the lockdowns are now being viewed increasingly with a very skeptical eye. Yet, blue state governors and the media are still pushing this narrative, but they're also moving the goalposts also. For example, perhaps the most tyrannical, not to mention hypocritical, of all the Marxist governors, Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer, completely changed the agenda and put 25% of the Michigan labor force on the skids. At first, her dictatorial instructions were, we have to flatten the curve. Well, that goal was reached about 6 weeks ago. Undeterred, in an effort to keep Michigan's economy underwater to, 1, enhance her own chances of being selected by Biden as VP and wreck Michigan just enough to prevent Trump from winning it again, she changed the entire goal from flattening the curve to preventing a second outbreak months down the road. The woman is a tyrant, and like all tyrants, she feels herself superior to those she's supposed to serve, but in her mind, they're just her subjects. Her husband called up the business owner of where their boat was in dry dock and tried to throw his weight around to get Gretchen's boat put in the water first. The owner of the business went public with it, saying Mr. Governor's husband said to him, "Do you know who I am?" Bad move. Whitmer had to get on the air and lie and say it was just a joke. Right. So now, as we move forward into the half of the country opening up and restoring their economies, despite Marxist Dems' efforts to destroy it, everything is becoming intensely political. The mask is being increasingly viewed as a Marxist muzzle, and the still hysterical approach of the media is proving to be as much an overreach as the initial shutdown. So now the race is on. The contest is full-blown. The left needs to make sure the economy doesn't rebound at least sufficiently to improve Trump's chances of re-election, and Trump needs to prove he is the man to lead through all of this and restore the most robust economy in the history of the world. Prior to the Wuhan, the president's campaign slogan was "Keep America Great." But considering the current mess, he might revert back to "Make America Great Again" and place the emphasis on again. It worked in 2016, after all. The left is now losing the lockdown war, just as they lost Russia, Ukraine, impeachment, social media wars, federal judges being seated, and so on. If 2016 is repeated, there will be collective suicides by the left. Oh well, you reap what you sow.